So this video is about a woman who's 93 years old. She's fighting developers to keep her home. And so she wants to be left alone. And so I read the article already, but I can go through it again. It's just sad. I wanted to say some things as I normally do, but I feel that people should really take notice of these developers and how they approach doing the work that they do. I know this is not every developer, but this sounds like this is a case of where they basically are harassing this woman and they're trying to make her wear her down, make her stressed, and make her feel like maybe she should just give in and sell her home. So this woman is fighting very hard, and she's been fighting for a long time to keep her home that has been passed down from generation to generation in her family. And so she happens to be a black woman, but this woman is in a house that was left to her and in her family since the Civil War. And so these developers have decided to build on close to her home on a property adjacent to where her house is. And so the fight is her keeping her home. She's been bombarded several times with people asking if they can buy her home, and they're trying to get her to sell it. And so she doesn't want to sell the home. So the title of this story is Leave Me Alone. 93-year-old woman fighting developers that she says they want her home. And so this is a case where it's not somebody that's homeless. It's not somebody who doesn't have a place to live. They have a place to live, but they're fighting to stay in it and keep it, not because they are behind in any rent. No, this home is paid for, and it goes down in the generations of this woman's family. And her family members are living there, and she's living there, and she's constantly harassed to sell her home. And there's little things that they've been doing along the way to persuade her to give in. And it's wrong. I'm just going to say that straight out the ballpark. I'm going to say I feel that this is really, really wrong. And she's really being targeted in so many different ways. And so a 93-year-old woman's fighting to keep her home that has been in her family as far back as the Civil War. So her name is Josephine Wright. So this is coming from WSAV-TV, that developers are trying to force her to sell her land. So this woman has a lot of land. And so they have tried to do everything, these developers have tried to do everything to persuade her to sell it. And so a lawsuit by Bailey Point Investment Group names Wright and the property's co-owner, the Wright's former daughter-in-law, Delores Wright, said, so Bailey Point is developing land right behind her home. So that's the developer's Bailey Point. And so what they did was they served her with improper papers, is what she said. So, which caused her to have to get an attorney that cost a lot of money. So Wright told WTGS-TV. However, they also claimed that she encroached on their property that was next to hers. And so the investment company is trying to develop 27 acres of land around Wright's property. Her granddaughter, Cherise Graves, told WTGS that all her grandmother wants is some peace and quiet, and that the last year has been anything but that. Unbeknownst to us, they just started tearing down trees, So this is coming from a statement from these people who are fighting to keep their homes. So they said that they heard the tearing of the trees and the loud noises, and our house was shaking like it was an earthquake. So they didn't even have the decency to let her know that what they were doing. So this was Graves that said this. So Bailey Point contends Wright's blocking their progress. So basically, this lady was already there. This is her land. And these developers weren't there in the beginning. But now that they want to build on a 27-acre property next to her land, they're accusing this woman who's always been there that she's encroaching on their progress and their property. And so it just seems like this right here is really, really like a money grab, and it seems greedy. And so this is why I mentioned greed is taking hold. And then on top of it, she's a female, these are women, and then they're also African American or black. But I feel this is also has a lot to do with greed. So I have to mention that. I feel like all of these issues having to do with housing, having to do with the high rents, having to do with property developers that come in and then they decide they can be really aggressive. And so I'm pointing this out in this article. You see how the developers, they stop at no means. If it's a money project, they stop at no means. And if you are, as they feel, in the way of what they're doing, you're in the way of their money. And so they've gotten cutthroat and aggressive, even to people who haven't really done anything wrong. They just pick a place and they decide to bulldoze, and come right on in and then just take over. And it's that attitude of conquering and by any means necessary without even, how they stress people to get permits before they can develop things or they can build stuff. They have a lot of, the cities or the buildings and safeties, they have lots of rules. They have to come and they have to inspect. They have to clear you, make sure that everything is cleared. So it is not just about buying a property, but you got to make sure you have all your papers in order, and you have to be legal, to build or to, remain in certain areas or do any alterations of any sort. And so these developers, that is what they do all day long. So they know the laws and the rules of the game, but they know also how to harass and persuade people to make choices that probably aren't good choices. It's just choices out of stress or out of fear or out of confusion because they don't know what else to do, because they've been bombarded by these developers that come in and just want to bulldoze and just, change everything around. And they're really aggressive. So she says she's been approached on several occasions, and it says that they filed a lawsuit saying parts of Wright's home these are Bailey Point's, the developing company. They filed a lawsuit against her saying that parts of Wright's home are on their property. Now this woman already was there, but they come and decide to do this 27-acre project, and now they're accusing her of encroaching on their property, or she's in the way, and they're trying to find all kinds of ways to pretty much wear this woman down. So they have the paperwork to prove it, among other issues. So Wright told WSAV that she had already paid to move a shed. So there was a shed that she had moved, which it cost her $1,900, and she got rid of the satellite dish. They had a satellite dish, I guess, for TV entertainment. So the developers say that her porch is still on their land and that they own. And so Wright said the developers made offers to buy her land, and she told WSAV that when she turned them down, they started to harass her. So I guess they figured that I would be so unnerved with the harassment that I would say, take it. And so I feel like she's right. That is what they're trying to do, wear this lady down until she finally just gives up the fight. And so, but they don't know me, and I'm here to fight for what I have, Wright told the TV station. And I agree with her. She should fight to the very end because she didn't do anything wrong. It's them coming over there and encroaching on her property. It's the other way around. They're trying to accuse this woman, and this woman's already been there. That house has been in her family. And so she shouldn't have to move because they decide they want to build something over there, so that doesn't make it right. And so that's how you see how this housing market, how very, very in demand and how very complicated and difficult it can be. I'm going to add to this. It's a separate issue, but it's similar, and it has all to do with what's been going on. Here in Los Angeles County, there are a lot of evictions going on, and then there's also probably in the foreseeable future, which is unfortunate, there will probably be some foreclosures because we're coming out of a pandemic state. The pandemic isn't completely over, but it's over in the sense that they are not, officials have called the pandemic coming to an end. In other words, it's really just left into the hands of the public to make wise decisions on how you approach places that you go. Should you wear a mask? Should you not wear a mask for your workplace and for places that you frequent? And so now we're at a place where, housing seems to be the issue. There's a lot of homelessness. They say 90% of the people that are homeless are from the state. A lot of them are from here. They just somehow fell into poverty, or they lost their homes, or they decided to use other means of living quarters, if it's a hotel or motel or RV. Here you got this woman. They own their home, is paid for. They own their home. And they're trying to force this woman off her own property and out of a home that they've had for many decades since the Civil War. I find that this is extremely wrong. But for developers to be this aggressive, it shows you a picture of what could happen to other people's homes. Now, I've read some stories that are very, very, very disturbing, where it talks about the freeways that we have. Like, we have a lot of freeways in LA. In LA, they always talk about the traffic, and there's a lot of traffic. What are we talking about when it comes to traffic right now? We're talking about fossil fuels and the pollution of the air, and a lot of toxic chemicals that are being put into the air, and they damage the ozone layer, and then they create problems with the air quality. And so those freeways, I learned there's a history behind the freeways that we have, and I'm sure from what I've also been reading, unfortunately, it's a history in other places, in other cities, where Black residents had communities, and those communities were similar to this, bulldozed. Developers came in, they said, we have to make this road. We've been ordered to make this road. And even though you own your home, you paid for your home, you're paying the taxes on your home, and you have made all the payments, you're just living in your home and you're trying to keep your home, they can come in, these developers, and this is where the racism and the systemic racism comes in at. Just bulldoze over the whole community and decide they're going to make roads. And with the noise from the freeways, they know the people are not going to want to stay in the homes because it's too noisy. And probably, when you see what's going on, It's just a very, very depressing and oppressive, stressful event to have to be in a home, and then you've got these cars buzzing like, constantly all day, all night. Some people live like that now, and that's just the city life. But if you look at this background of the lady where she lives, it looks like it's an area where it's more rural, it's a lot of land, it's a lot of yard space. I mean, she could have like 6 dogs. She could have a garden. She has a lot of land, and I feel like they're just being greedy developers, and they just want to take what the lady has acquired over a course of her life. And I think it's wrong. And you don't see a whole lot of black people with property like this. And if they do, trust me, I've had other people I've spoken to said that they had homes left to them that without fail, these developers and these real estate people, they come along and they want to buy the property. They want to hurry up and make these people sell the only home that they've ever had, and they probably ever will have. Because if you look at the housing market the way it is now, it's just ridiculous. And it's almost to the point to where it's impossible for people to actually acquire home ownership. And if you acquire home ownership here in the metropolitan states, a lot of times they try to encourage you to get into a townhome or condo, which additionally the homeowner's insurance can be expensive. It can also shift and it fluctuates. It can go up over time, but it doesn't go up that much. But still, just the idea that that's something that has to be paid every month throughout the duration and the course of you living in a condo. It's like a fancy apartment or a townhome. You have to stay paying that homeowners association fee, and I've heard from some people who had things like that say that sometimes they don't use that money to fix things. So there's another issue with that, and so that's a whole other ball game or animal right there in itself. And so here you got this woman, she has a detached home, and they're trying to just basically take it from her. That's what I'm looking at it as. They're just basically trying to take this home from this woman, and it's wrong. So, in the articles, basically she had to hire attorneys. And so, with those legal fees with attorneys, it's going to be super expensive having to deal with them. So it says, former state representative and civil rights attorney Bakari Sellers is now part of Wright's legal team now. So she has a legal team, and the TV stations reported this. So when we have conversations about systemic injustice, basically saying what I said before I even get to the sentence, systemic injustices and the fact that the black folk are separated from their land, that is what we're talking about exactly. However, this doesn't affect one young lady, but it affects her entire family. So Sellers told WTGS, although this is about a black lady owning property, this isn't really just a black and white issue alone. This is about right and wrong. And that I truly agree. And also I want to say greed seems to be a huge focus as to money grabs why these people are doing this to folks. So Wright has 7 children, 40 grandchildren, and 50 great-grandchildren, and 16 great-great-grandchildren. They all want to keep the historic property in their family. So WTGS said this, and so I want to just keep my property and them to leave me alone, Wright told WSAV. And so basically that's the whole story of the article. And the article is entitled, Leave Me Alone, 93-year-old woman fighting developers. Just listen to that. Fighting developers, she says, that want her home. And so I'm going to put the title in the video, but I just thought by looking at this, it just shows how cutthroat things are getting. Anytime you can own your own home, you're there. You're where a lot of people wish they could be, but you're not safe. Unfortunately, you're not safe. You still have the threat of losing your home to this. I heard another lady, she was given a home by her parents. She was like in her 70s. She said her home, they keep calling her house. They keep harassing her, trying to get her to sell her house. And she's in Pasadena. And she lives in like a nice part of Pasadena. And they keep trying to get her to sell her home just the same. And they keep offering her like large sums of money. And she says she doesn't want to let go of her home either. And I don't blame her, because you know what's going to happen? She has to get out and do the work of finding another place to live. And that money runs out quick. And they know this. And it's not enough money to get into another home, because then you have to go through the whole episode. You have to move, you have to get movers, and over the years of living in a home, you acquire a lot of things. And then you also have to scuffle to find places that will allow you to move in. And you probably won't have the land that she has that you're looking at right here. If she moves, if she was to sell her home, this woman right here, right? She's probably not going to find a house like what she has now, with all that land and all that space. And if she's smart, she wouldn't sell it. You know, she wouldn't sell it. But they're going to try to force her to sell it. And they're going to, if they have to build roads or build stores or build, certain places around her house that are noisy, and anything to just try to persuade her to leave her home and give it to them, they'll do it. And so this woman I was referring to in Pasadena, she said she had her home since she was in her home since she was a child. And so her dad left it to her. Now she's in her 70s. And she says that in Pasadena, they keep coming and bugging her. She gets phone calls where they try to trick her into giving her home away. And this is a black woman too. And so they did the same thing to my mother. When she was in her house, they would call her. They even called her and tried to get her to give her social security number. It's a lot of stuff that goes on having to do with people of our persuasion. In other words, black people, when we have something we've acquired and you get older, they know that, some people get old and they have dementia, or they forget things, or they're not as, quick to remember. And they might have trouble, understanding what people are trying to do and get confused. And I've heard stories where people sign away their home. They sign, and they target elderly people. And can be any elderly person of any background, just because they figure it's the thing to do and that they can get away with it. And they figure, well, this person's old, they're not going to be around long. Well, you don't realize they have grandkids, they have great-grandkids, they have immediate children that are adults. But, they just don't care. All they care about is their project and their money. And so with that being said, I'm going to put this video of the title of where you see this woman, and you can look at it for yourself. It's not that long. I read it. It was very short. But I'm just looking. I've done a lot of, you notice recently it's been a lot about housing. And it's getting, I hate to say this, but it is starting to look like we might be, they say that California is a homeless state. And because we have a third of the homeless in our state. And then, some people would say, oh, it's because the weather is more ideal. If you're homeless, you could probably make it better in this type of weather. And that some people from other places move here. I think some of that is true, but I think a majority of the people that are here are from here, and they fell into poverty, and it could be a mix of things, not only substance abuse, but it could also be just the fact that they can't afford to live where they have lived, and they were behind on rent. And then with this COVID lockdowns that had happened during the upswing of the pandemic, all those issues, it really put a lot of people behind. It set people back. It even set homeowners back where I know I heard a newscast or podcast where they were talking about, I think it was Wells Fargo, one of the banks, where they automatically enrolled the homeowners in a deference, where they deferred or delayed their mortgage. And some people were trying to get that reversed, because what happens is, it's just like having a subprime loan. Later, it gets so big that you can't pay it because it's too much money, because it's like accumulated over time. So it's sort of like something like that, but this was more, they were doing this in effort because the people when during the pandemic, some people needed some help paying their mortgage, or they needed like temporary help. And so there were programs, I think, that also helped to pay people's mortgage if they had less hours from their employment, or they lost their employment, or they had their employment temporarily closed down because of what was going on, because a lot of businesses had closed down because people couldn't be in close contact, and they were trying to keep people away from one another for quite a while. And so a lot of places had closed down because it was just so scary. But with that happening, and now we're coming out of that event, things are resuming, but they say we're in a recession, and then you hear mixed messages. First they say recession, and they say, oh, we're slowly coming out of recession. Oh no, we're still in a recession. Then you hear them say, oh, the housing market is bouncing back. Then they say, oh no, it's not doing well. And if you ask me, I don't think it's doing well. I think they don't tell us everything, and they keep a lot swept under the rug. And looking at, from the looks of this right here, just taking people's property because you think if we build here, we can just do this. I don't know if you listened to what had happened to some people that live in mobile home parks. There was a situation where the people lived in mobile home parks, and I thought, now they own those mobile homes. When they live in the mobile home, they pay the space rent. And so these people, they were living like really in poverty, but they own their own RV. But when you're in the mobile home parks, you gotta pay rent, a space rent, a lot rent, where your mobile home is parked. And so if you want to move it to another mobile home park or another location, it takes a lot of money to do that. And so I guess it was Grand Canyon University was coming in to build some, I don't know if it's student housing or more buildings for the university, but they just said, we're coming in and we're going to just wipe out this mobile home area. And these developers and these companies are aggressive. And so seeing this should give homeowners a clue as to how aggressive and how scary this could get. That if they can come and do this to this woman, and then some of the other people I've heard they've done things to, it's not out of the realm of reality that it could come down to where the homeowners or the people that are owning their homes now could be faced with similar issues such as this. And so I wouldn't be surprised if it's already happening in some parts of the city where people, they own their home, but developers come in and then they just decide, we're going to build this and you got to get out, or you got to decide, do you want to sell? Or if you don't sell, they probably scare the people and tell them, well, we're going to have roads here, it's going to be noisy, or we're going to have shopping center here, there's going to be a lot of foot traffic, there's going to be a lot of people, and when it brings a lot of people, you don't know who these people are, they're going to be around close to your home, who knows what they're telling them to scare them into selling their home. So I'm just saying, this is for the homeowners. Beware. Even having a home doesn't make you safe.